Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Pastor Matt back again with another daily dose of defense. Now, what I've been talking about lately is this early church history, kind of bringing us on to this final stage. We've seen how the early church fathers celebrated the writings of the Gospels, writings of Scripture, Paul's letters, all of the different things that make up what we consider the New Testament. We've seen them defend it. We've seen them say that other writings are not good, other writings do not belong. But today what I really want to talk about is the oldest existing copy, complete copy, of the New Testament. And that is called the Codex Sianaticus. Codex meaning book, Sianaticus meaning from Sinai. So it's the book from Sinai. It was found in an Egyptian monastery. So we'll get into that in just a minute. So it's from the mid-4th century. It's an Alexandrian style with unical writing. That means large, sweeping block letters. It's made up of different folios. All these folios, if you combine them all together, would have taken about 360 animals to produce, animal skins to produce this. That's complete animals. And the largest single portion of it is held in the London Library, or the British Library, sorry. They have 346 and a half of the folios, or 694 pages. The 199 of them belong to the Old Testament. The remainder of them are New Testament writings, as well as the Epistle of Barnabas and the Shepherd of Hermas. It has been dated to the mid-4th century, but it could not have been written before 325 because it does contain some writing of Eusebius, or the Eusebian canon, which happened obviously before then. The Codex, it kind of went into hiding for a long time. Wasn't seen. 1761 rolls around. An Italian traveler named Vitaliano Donati was traveling through. He went to St. Catherine's Monastery at Sinai in Egypt, and he wrote in his diary, it says, "In this monastery I found a great number of parchment codices. There are some which seem to be written before the 7th century, and especially a Bible, made of beautiful vellum, very large and thin and square parchments, written in round and very beautiful letters. Moreover, there are also in the church a Greek evangelistarium, in gold and round letters. It should be very old." Right? And so he's talking about this Bible in beautiful vellum with beautiful words, beautiful lettering. So he sees it in 1761. It's later officially discovered in the late 1800s, and it's then brought to, parts of it are brought to London. Parts of it are brought to Russia, where it stays there, and some parts are left. As a matter of fact, there are 43 leaves in Leipzig University Library in Germany. There are 3 leaves in the Russian National Library in St. Petersburg. There are 12 leaves and 14 fragments in St. Catherine's Monastery, with the remainder of it, the 347 leaves, in the British Library in London. Along with the Vaticanus, the Sinaiticus, the Codex Sianaticus, and the Codex Vaticanus. These are the 2 of the most valuable resources available. We do have earlier smaller parchment pieces, even earlier complete letters, but this is the earliest complete copy of the New Testament that we have. And it's so important because it allows us to trace the Bible all the way back to what was said in the writings less than 300 years after it was finished. We're talking 250 years after the completion of the canon of the New Testament. We have a complete version, a complete copy, all of it bound together. But it does have these two extra books, and I think we should talk a little bit about these extra books. The first one is the Epistle of Barnabas. It is said to have been from Barnabas, co-laborer with Paul, and the people who say that are Clement of Alexandria, who was around from 150 to 215. This is not the Alexandria or the Clement I talked about previously, but also Origen talks about it. Clement quotes it with phrases such as the Apostle Barnabas says, and Origen speaks of it as a general epistle of Barnabas. Eusebius, he does not include it in his accepted books list. He classified it as rejected or spurious writing. There would be lists that would include it, but not all. And then for the Shepherd of Hermas, there are several ancient witnesses that tie the Shepherd of Hermas to Pope, I want to say it right, Pope Pius I, brother, Hermas. And they tie it to him, and in doing so, they definitely keep it away from being in the canon of the Bible, since Pope Pius was around from 140 to 155 was when his pontificate was. But the Moratorium fragment is a list that was written around AD 170, which talks about the shepherd when it says, "But Hermas wrote the shepherd very recently, in our times, in the city of Rome, while Bishop Pius, his brother, was occupying the chair of the church in the city of Rome. And therefore it ought to indeed be read, but it cannot be read publicly to the people in church, either among the prophets, whose number is complete, or among the apostles, for it is after their time." So we have disputations on both of these books, as well as when were they written. If we can't solidify this, it tells us that these are not to be included in the canon, which is why they were left out of the final canon. Now that brings us to, well, what about the other books, the books that aren't there? Why aren't they there? Now there's the whole list of Gnostic books that highlight Gnostic beliefs and things of that nature. But the two that I really want to talk about are the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Judas. Now, the Gospel of Thomas was written somewhere in the 2nd century. Hippolytus talked about it, as well as Origen of Alexandria. But Hippolytus wrote, "The Essenes speak of a nature which is both hidden and revealed at the same time, and which they call the thought for kingdom of heaven, which is in a human being. They transmit a tradition concerning this in the Gospel entitled According to Thomas, which states expressly, the one who seeks me will find me in children of 7 years and older, for there, hidden in the 14th aeon, I am revealed." He's talking about the Gospel of Thomas and saying, hey, this comes from heretics. This comes from people you can't believe. This comes from people who don't know who Jesus was. This comes from people whose ideas do not fall in line with that of the apostles. And he should know. He was the disciple of a disciple. So he falls in that line that we were talking about of disciples. And Origen listed the Gospel of Thomas as being among heterodox apocryphal Gospels. So heterodox meaning it's not orthodox, or not within the realms of what we should believe, what we should read, what we should have we should be intaking. So the Gospel of Judas, it was condemned early by Irenaeus. He condemned it and he was writing about 180, and he said that there's no reason to believe this. It basically paints Judas as nothing more than a guy following Jesus' commands, and when he handed him over, when he betrayed him, he was actually just handing him over as the master had ordered. Right. So these two gospels are both Gnostic in nature. They are both, you know, they don't paint the picture properly. They don't have proper doctrine. They cannot be attested or cannot be attached to the people who were attested to having written them. Even though we have early attestation of what they were called, these aren't. They're not attached to people. The provenance. If this were, you know, we're looking for the proper things. The provenance isn't there. The ability to look and say, yes, this is authentic, this is legitimate, it's just not there. Whereas with the 27 books of the New Testament that we have now, that is there. We know who wrote them, we know when they wrote them, we know where they came from. Church fathers talked about these and said, yes, these are good. The only one that we don't know where it came from is the book of Hebrews, but it's quoted in the 1st century by a church father as being good, being a solid book that one should listen to. So out of all of this, what I really want you to understand is that we can trace the roots of the Bible all the way back to what was written. We can see that it's been carefully handled, carefully copied, carefully done, and it is necessary that we not accept these people who say that we can't trust the Bible because it was written later and it was, that's hogwash, because it wasn't written later. It wasn't written 100 years later. It was written 50 years later, 30 years later. The ideas go to within a year and a half of the crucifixion of Christ. This is what we must understand. And that those ideas carry all the way through to this oldest version of the New Testament that we still have. And in that, we can see that the Bible has not been tampered with. And that we have reason to believe that the Bible is still the words that were written in the 1st century. This has been a Daily Dose of Defense. Thank you for listening.